Hello, VC. It's Dave here. Thought I'd come on and do a contest entry into Pete's contest. He has 200 subs and is getting a little more, and he wanted to get a contest going. The name of his channel is called Sounds from the West Coast, and Peter's from England, and I guess he lives on the west coast of England somewhere. So first heard of Pete back when Sound Strange or Rob had his channel on YouTube, and he mentioned Pete's channel and said how he liked it, and so I subscribed back then just to watch him, and was happy to see that he included a lot of progressive rock in his the albums that he showed, and so I was kind of won over by that. So anyway, Pete wants us to show what he says laying the foundation, or the stepping stones that got you into certain musical genres. And when I was young, my parents had a RCA music, not a stereo, it was actually mono, but a player, music player, and had like a big spindle, and the only thing it would play would be 45s, and so us kids would collect 45s. This is probably one of my sisters, I'm guessing. And then once the Beatles invasion started up, started collecting Beatles and British invasion rock and roll groups. And then back in '65, we moved from East Texas to West Texas, and right before we moved, that Christmas, my parents bought me Sears Silvertone record player, which I've spoken of before, and this was the first album that they bought me, Beatles '65. Excellent choice too. I guess my mom knew I was a big Beatles fan, and she just really, this was really targeted towards me. And of course I went crazy all over the stereo and crazy over this album too. This began more or less my quest for music and enjoying that hobby. So kudos to Mom. So now I'm kind of thinking, like, what albums, what genres introduced me to certain genres. And like I showed that Rolling Stones 45 there. Well, once I got my stereo, I started collecting albums. And with this one, this was a bunch of Rolling Stones hits that they'd had on the radio. And this was, I guess I could say, this was my entry into blues. I really didn't get further into the blues until much later on, but I guess I was thinking, like, this might be my first introductions to the blues, would be the Rolling Stones. Great album too. I think maybe James Taylor would probably be my entry into folk music. Back when I was growing up, Sweet Baby James and Country Road, Fire and Rain. Fire and Rain was all over the radio, and of course I picked this up because of that. I had it on vinyl and later got it on CD, but yeah, Fire and Rain. It was either Fire and Rain for folk. Around the same time too was Simon and Garfunkel, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. I had a friend down the street, and his brother was going to some Ivy League school, and I can't remember if it was Yale or Harvard or one of those. And my friend was all into playing acoustic guitar, and his brother was always would bring home a couple albums, and Jeff would play them in his room, and Simon Garfunkel was surely one of them. And then, like, he brought him home some psychedelic music, brought him home Jimi Hendrix and Jefferson Airplane, and I first learned about those bands from Jeff, and then further picked those albums up myself, and started getting into some psychedelic and folk music as well. My parents and took us kids up through Colorado. My sister had just gotten married, and I believe we stopped off in Colorado Springs, and there was a little kind of a how would I put it, sort of a boutique, I guess you could say, that had albums. And I saw this album in that boutique, and just, you know, I didn't know anything about it. It was a blind buy. But I saw the cover and would just keep staring at the art, and then I'd walk around some more and pick this up again. I thought, what in the world does this sound like? You know, they didn't play any of their music at all on the radio, and even didn't after Frank Zappa and them others became somewhat popular. And so I bought it there that day, and this is the album that kind of got me interested in avant-garde music, I think. Listened to this album over and over and tried to detangle what was on the inside of this album. And, you know, Susie Cream Cheese and that very bizarre stuff on the second album. And then you had stuff like Who Are the Brain Police and so forth on that first album. And it was a truly interesting album to try and get into, and of course all my friends hated it. This would have been one of those albums that if I wanted to run people out of my room, I'd put this on. But over time, even my brother, I don't think he appreciated it too much, maybe starting out. He just thought it was weird, which I did too. But I think even he started liking this album quite a bit, and he bought it on CD once it came out. I was trying to think of what music may have got me into, say, folk rock or country. And this album here isn't real heavy on the country, although it does have Steve Stills in it, and Neil Young and Richie Furay. And you know, this might have been, I might have bought this before the Byrds album, Sweetheart of the Rodeo, and I'm not sure. I know I bought some of the Byrds 45s because they were on the radio too back then, along with For What It's Worth, and was there another one on here? Well, For What It's Worth was on the radio back then, but eventually Buffalo Springfield broke up, and I followed Richie Furay into Poco, which is kind of more of a country rock type band. Sort of on some of their albums there's a little bit of bluegrass too, and so I'd say kind of Poco kind of headed me in that direction. Then I found, you know, the Byrds, Sweetheart of the Rodeo, and Flying Burrito Brothers, and New Riders, and all those other bands. I saw Peter, he had chosen Tangerine Dream's Phaedra, which I picked that album up too. That was the first album by Tangerine Dream I had picked up. But this album here, Snowflakes Are Dancing by Tomita, I think we bought this, me and my brother bought this before that, and my brother had it on a 8-track, I believe, or maybe he bought the album, I can't remember now, too long ago. But eventually I picked up the album too, and yeah, very nice way to be introduced into the electronic music style of music. Still listen to this album today after all those years, and it's still pretty wonderful. Pink Floyd, Zumaguma. This is the first Pink Floyd album I believe that I bought, if I'm not mistaken. I bought this, then picked up Metal, and then sort of kind of went back and forward on picking up some of their other albums. But I was intrigued by this album cover as well, and would look at the back of it and listen to all the songs. It has a live side and a studio side, and then you have all the great weirdness that comes with it. I always thought this was a great sort of psychedelic album by Pink Floyd, but of course it's got Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, and it's got Careful with That Axie Gene, to do a great cut of that on here, and just with all the other stuff like the Grantchester Meadows, which is a nice acoustic guitar song by Roger Waters. But yeah, Zumaguma. And this might have been my first jazz album that I picked up. I really can't remember. This is Dave Brubeck's all-time greatest hits. But before I bought this jazz album here, I think I was listening to this that had a lot of jazz on it, and this is Spirit's. This is a twofer. Spirit's first album and their third album. And so the third album, I believe, was called, the first album was just called Spirit. The third album was called Clear, and it had a bunch of jazzy type songs on it, like the song Clear, and some other songs that are kind of jazzy. And I think really this album here is maybe something that introduced me to jazz, even though it's in a kind of a rock. It is in a rock and roll album, and in that idiom, still those jazzy interludes and everything that Spirit was playing kind of got me into jazz. And later, then I picked up this Dave Brubeck album, along with some other jazz. And this is a good jazz album to start getting into the medium too. As far as classical, I really couldn't remember what was the first thing I bought as far as classical, although The Planets is a real easy set of compositions to get into. So you've got the Planets. This is another one too, Vivaldi's The Four Seasons, and both these albums more or less introduced me to classical music, which I still listen to today. Generally, if I'm in traffic, there's a couple of stations that I can kind of pick up. They're out of Dallas, but there are enough that I can hear it, although they kind of fade and everything. And I'll listen to classical music in the car, but and at home too. But yeah, I still love classical music quite a bit. I think this may have been my first introduction, although I was listening to Hearts of Space back in the 80s. I had a friend there in Austin that had picked up this album and introduced it to me. Andreas Vollenbinder or Vollenweider, I'm not sure how he pronounces his last name. He's a harpist, and got to see him in concert down there in Austin when me and my brother were down there. But this is a really wonderful album, actually, and I picked up several of his other albums later, along with some other New Age type albums. There was actually a little record store, it was a record store, sort of a boutique store, but although it was fairly big, that handled a lot of the New Age at the time. They had them on cassette, which were big during that era, and albums too. And they had crystals, and they had books on, New Age stuff, and, all that kind of thing. It was all pretty interesting to go in that shop and look around. I forget the name of it now. Might have been called the Book People. But me and my brother liked going in there and looking around when we visited Austin. And they've since moved, or at least last time I was down there, they since moved and, really expanded their store into having a lot more books and, music and various other things, aromatherapy and, all that kind of thing. But, yeah, Andreas Vollenbinder. Then Pete wanted us to name somebody that we had seen as an influence on our musical journey. And I believe he mentioned Alan Freeman, that is a DJ over there in Britain. And for me over here, there was something very similar to that over here in the States, and that was American Bandstand. But you can see Dick Clark right here talking to the teenagers. Now before right there, before I had any, we always had the radio, AM, growing up. But this show here used to come on, like, I believe it was Saturday afternoons. And my sister started watching it, and I would watch it with her. And then I watched it all the way until we moved back in '66, '67. And it was a major influence on, they'd always have, they'd play the hits of the day, and then they have a little contest, and, all kind of things. But, they'd showcase a band on there. I really remember the time they had Paul Revere and the Raiders, and they had Blue Cheer actually on there at one time, and a bunch of other bands way back then. On this is a 2 CD set, and from the 50s right here. And this is another thing that my mother gave me one Christmas. But since I grew up in the 50s, this has all the hits from the 50s, like Wake Up Little Susie by the Everly Brothers, and Frankie Avalon's Venus, Dion and the Belmonts, A Teenager in Love, Love Potion No. 9 by the Clovers, and Teen Angel by Mark Denning, Come Go With Me by the Del Vikings. It's just filled with old hits from back then. Is really a fun CD to listen to when you're in the mood. But yeah, for sure, American Bandstand, Dick Clark and American Bandstand was a big influence on me here in the States, and used to watch it every weekend. So there you go, Pete. I hope you get a lot more entries into your contest, and I'll leave a link below for anybody that wants to enter it, so that you get maybe some more entries, maybe get some more people to sub your channel. But just wanted to enter. It's real rainy here. The snow is gone, but we're having lots of rain here in this area. And anyway, I'm hoping for spring and some sun for a change. That would be nice. But anyway, wanted to say hey, enter your contest, and we'll talk to you later.